Hello, World Civ students. Today we're going to finish up we're not going to finish up. We're going to get to the point that I said we were going to leave off yesterday. We're going to get there today. That is the goal. We're going to get done with the pre-World War I part of the World War I notes. I just want to emphasize that it is very, very important that you're actually watching the videos and not just guessing on the questions. I cannot emphasize enough how easy it is to tell whenever you did not actually watch the video. I specifically design the questions so that I would be able to tell that you watched the video. It is incredibly, incredibly obvious when you just Google the answer. And that might be why you're seeing that your grade is lower than maybe what you would expect. Because when you Google it, it's usually not the right answer anyway, because I'm looking for a very specific answer that you would have had to have watched the video in order to get. And guys, I've went through the Unit 4 tests, and I really don't know what to say other than I made that test it was an alternate test. The Unit 4 test used to be all short answer, um, but I got tired of grading it all. I wrote that version of the test for a kid that didn't speak but maybe 20 words of English, and he got an A on it. So the fact that our highest grade in the class was an 84% is kind of really embarrassing. You should be disappointed in yourself. That's unacceptable. I know this is online learning and all that, but that is embarrassing. I made that test for a kid that didn't speak English. It was so easy. It was the most broad, easy test of the entire semester. If we were in the school building still, I have no doubt that you would have done very well on that test because that's how it is with every other semester, because this is the only time we've had the online learning, right? So that tells me that, the online learning is not very effective. I'm sure the government is still going to try to always be pushing for more technology and all that, but it doesn't work as well. It just doesn't. But that in mind, we're in the situation that we're in, and you're going to have to make the most of it. You're going to have to study. You're going to have to take matters into your own hands. That's just the way that it is. Because, again, this is important information. You need to know this stuff. If I have to go through and remake everything onto an online format and film myself, I end up working more hours with this online learning than I do in the actual school building because I already have everything made for the actual school building. If I have to do the extra work, and believe me, there are definitely inconveniences for me as well. Okay, I have a 4-month-old. I have a house to take care of. I have a business to run. We all have things going on. Okay, you're gonna have that's the thing with online learning. Like it is in your corner. You have to make the effort. When I took classes online in college, if it was a class that I didn't really care about it, but didn't really learn it. I took Spanish 3 in college. I don't remember any of it because I didn't care. The online learning is entirely on there's only so much I can do. I'm not physically there to hound you down, okay? Miss Wingate's not physically there to hound you down. You're going to have to seize your destiny, right? You're going to have to actually not be lazy, okay? Um, and that's the thing with actual being there school, you are forced to be there and you are forced to pay attention to a certain degree because if you're not, I'm going to call you out on it. I'm right there. But with online learning, there's really no way for me to 100% make you watch the notes and pay attention. And I think that that's entirely why we see the grades that we're seeing on the test. And it is embarrassing. For the French Revolution, Napoleon thing, I gave you guys a 6% curve, meaning that you got 6 points just because the person that got the highest score was a 94, so you curve it up to 100 so then everybody else gets curved up 6%. That was so that you guys could adapt to this online thing. You should be adapted by now. I'm not doing any more curves. Some of you literally got 3 right out of 32 questions. That is embarrassing. I mean, it's very obvious you didn't watch the video. This World War I test is difficult. You need to pay attention. You need to do the discussion questions. Believe it or not, I've actually already had this kind of a speech with my psych class. You guys lasted a bit longer than them. But that's because I've also been more lenient on you guys. Anyway, the third reason for World War I, the third giant barrel of gunpowder, is nationalism. Nationalism, again, I said, is like that most important vocab word of the entire semester. It is having a great amount of loyalty and pride in your nation, to the point of which it is like it's like dangerous. In the early 1900s, it is at probably the highest that it's going to be until really World War II. In Britain, in France, and Germany, you're going to see a ton of what we call propaganda. You know, Britain's going to have songs like Rule Britannia, and Land of Hope and Glory. The Germans are going to have Deutschland über alles, you know, Germany above all. They're going to have national anthems. They're going to have posters like you see here. You know, you see the Deutschland über alles right here, right? You know, they have posters with it, Germany above all. And you're like, well, posters are kind of lame. You know, what the heck does that really do? Well, they didn't have radio back then. They didn't have TV. Posters was the way that you advertised. You know, that's the way that you got your message out there. So it's very nationalistic. It's very rife and full of propaganda. And there is going to be an assignment in this unit, which I'm still going to have you do because you totally can do it, is you're going to make your own poster of propaganda or comic strip of propaganda. And you're going to have to demonstrate your knowledge of propaganda. You know, usually I have, you know, for in class together, I have a, you know, you're in groups of 3, right? So, you know, ideally somebody in the group would have some artistic talent. So there's going to be a little bit less of an emphasis on the artistic talent and more of an emphasis on the creativity and the message of your propaganda, showing that you truly understand what propaganda is. So second, it made those ruled by the Ottoman Empire, aka Romania and Bulgaria, and those ruled by Austria-Hungary, which is kind of what Austria is called now, Serbia and Bosnia. They want to be free and rule themselves because nationalism is, you know, it's like with the German unification. They didn't have a country, but they still had nationalism in that they were the same culture group. They spoke the same language. So in Serbia, Bosnia, Romania, and Bulgaria, these are Slavic people. These are, you know, Southeast Europeans. And so they're going to have a sense of nationalism, and they're going to want to be separated from the Ottoman Empire and Austria because they don't speak German and they're not Muslim. So they don't belong in either of those empires. So they want their own country. And so they are also going to have lots of propaganda. And these two things, number 1 and 2, are really why and how nationalism impacts, well, is a big barrel on the ship, that analogy that I'm using. Now, real quick, I want to talk about this here. Normally, I would be asking you questions and breaking down, well, who do you think this is? Who do you think this represents? Who do you think this represents? Who do you think this represents? This is a image of propaganda, right? Obviously, we know that the guy in the middle is German or Prussian because, number 1, this is in German, And this is the spike on the helmet. So we know that that's the German. I mean, I feel like stereotypically you can tell this is the Russian, this is the French, and this is the English. You know, he's in his sailor's outfit. And, you know, what is the German doing here? He is absolutely dominating these other three. And, you know, in a world where there's not, you know, TV or radio, you have posters. And so this would really convey a message of, like, these are your commercials. These posters are like your commercials, you know. This would really convey a message that Germany really is better than all of the other nations, you know. They're like trampling. It would give you like a sense of, yeah, we are better, right? Like even in America today, we do kind of have like a certain attitude and understanding that, yeah, we are better than other countries because we've won so many wars and we are the world power. We're the most powerful country in the world. That gives us a sense of power and authority. And I mean, that is a partially result of certain elements of propaganda that are even in our country still today. So propaganda, nationalism is going to have a huge part to play in all of this. Now I want to tell you a story because what propaganda looks like in our world in today's age is a little bit different. And you might think, well, that stuff would never work on me. Like that poster would never work on me. You know, like, that's all ridiculous. These people are evil. You know, they're all nationalistic. I'm better than them. Yeah, you might think that you are, but chances are you probably aren't. You know, propaganda is incredibly effective. Even in today's world, I don't want to get too political, but there are a lot of things in today's world that you probably have opinions on because of propaganda. You probably just didn't know that it was propaganda because they're really good at hiding the ways of which they manipulate the way that we think. You know, case in point, you go back even like 30, you even go back to the whenever I was born in the 1990s, you know, abortion was considered murder. Like, well, maybe it was considered killing, right? It was viewed very differently. And now you're considered a bigot and you're anti-woman if you are, you know, they use words like, well, it's not a baby, it's a fetus, right? That's dehumanization, right? That it is a form of propaganda, okay? It is a form of, they use ads and media and speeches and posters, advertisement to convey a certain political message and convince you of something. That's propaganda. And as you can tell in the last few decades, that propaganda has been pretty efficient, as in, I'd say, at the very least, half of the population, I would say in America, would consider abortion not killing a human life, even though it has all the same chromosomes and it's going to be, you know, anyway, I'm not going to get into all that. But point is, you know, you can still believe what you want about that political topic, but you can't deny that there was propaganda and that there was influence from media and politicians who were, I mean, Planned Parenthood makes millions of dollars off of convincing people that it's not killing. So they use propaganda, and it's obviously been very effective. They make a lot of money every year through abortions. And so we you know, we like to think that we're immune to advertisement, that we are immune to propaganda, but propaganda just looks different in today's world, and a lot of times we don't recognize how it's influencing us. So, for example, you know, like Taco Bell, you know, like they spend millions of dollars finding out how to get you to want their product. Like there are people that get degrees in marketing, and their degrees, they take classes on how to get you to buy products, on how to make proper advertisements. Like they know how to manipulate you, you know? Like, and the thing is, you can sometimes be totally aware of what they're doing and it can still work on you. So like, you know, Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola has all these commercials with polar bears, and it looks like they're having a good time, and it's super fun, and it's awesome, and they're just chilling up there in the North Pole drinking their Coca-Cola, having a party, and you're like, man, I kind of want to have Coca-Cola with some polar bears. I want to chill with some polar bears. They look nice. Well, we all know in real life that if you were to go and try to have a Coca-Cola with a polar bear, that it's not going to go very well. That polar bear is going to take your head off, eat you a lot, eat you and wash you down with a Coca-Cola, right? You're not going to be chilling with a bunch of polar bears in the North Pole. We know it's ridiculous, but it conveys a message of fun. It conveys a message of a cold drink, something a polar bear would like. It conveys all of these positive emotions. So although we know it's ridiculous that that we would have a party with polar bears and drink Coca-Cola, that's not the point. That's not what they're trying to convince you of. They're trying to get you to subconsciously associate Coca-Cola with a good time. To further accentuate my point, there's a Coca-Cola commercial where Coca-Cola is very good with their advertisements, generally speaking. There's an ad where it's for Diet Coke, and the lady she's in like coach on an airplane, and it's like really dull, and the guy sitting next to her is like really ugly and kind of, seems like he's going to be a little invasive of her personal space. And then she takes a drink of a Diet Coke, and the airplane literally turns into a giant rave party. Oh, well, that was weird. Excuse me. Had a little burp while I was starting to talk there. So the guy next to her is suddenly very attractive, right? And she's having like this hallucinogenic party, and then like the Diet Coke fades off and it looks like all boring again, and she just smiles and takes another drink of the Coke. We all know that Diet Coke is not going to give us some hallucinogenic party, but it does subconsciously, subliminally, I can't say that word. It does subtly put a message in our brain of associating Coca-Cola with having a good time, that Coca-Cola improves your situation. Another example from Coca-Cola, this one really cracks me up. I'm sure you've seen this commercial. There was, this guy goes into a gas station, right? And he goes to the refrigerator and he's looking for the Coca-Cola with his name on it. So he grabs Coca-Cola, he grabs another Coca-Cola, he comes up to the cashier, and amazingly, I don't think he looks at her name tag, but amazingly the other Coke he grabs is her name. And she smiles. And by the way, the gas station attendant is attractive. Like, it's a pretty girl. She's got nice curly hair. I have never seen a gas station attendant who is attractive. No offense to anybody that has a friend that's a gas station attendant, but I'm sure they're out there maybe, but not like this girl. Like, she could be a model for American Eagle or something, So there's that unrealistic, element, in commercials they usually use attractive people because you want to associate your product with attractiveness. But the point is, he comes up with these Cokes, they smile, and it's a cute little moment. And by the way, he's very handsome as well. Abercrombie pretty, he's man pretty, right? And then he goes out into the street, and there's a bunch of fireworks and a giant parade and a party, and they go out together and have a party. That is never, ever going to happen in a million years, and we know that. Okay, we know that that's ridiculous. Just like with this piece of propaganda, we know that the German can't literally do that, but it does put a subconscious, subtle message into our minds. You watch movies, right? Movies can have propaganda in them without you even realizing it. Like the Avatar movies are very, very heavily environment, global warming, slowly and subtly, not so much subtly in that movie, convincing you take care of the earth. Or you watch Captain Marvel, and you also, again, not all that subtle, but to some people that are a little bit more gullible, maybe they don't notice, but there is a very heavy message of men are bad, women are good, feminism, like crush men, There is that subtle manipulation and message in the movie. Every movie has a message. Every movie has something they're trying to convince you of. Like in my books, the big message behind my books is that all life matters, no matter who you are. You know, it's not what I can get from you practically that makes you valuable, but the fact that you are a human being, and that makes you inherently valuable. That is what my books is about. And I never just come out straightly and like say that right out, but I have it like subtly to where you're absorbing that information without realizing it, right? So when you're watching a commercial, if you're not like thinking about it, you don't really notice how they're manipulating you. Like again, like Taco Bell, like we all know whenever you see that commercial with like the nacho cheese drizzling over the burrito or whatever, we know Taco Bell doesn't look like that. We know that it doesn't look like that, but it makes us want the product. When we look at the pictures on the McDonald's menu, we know that that's not what the actual hamburger looks like. But it's marketing. It's a form of propaganda. It's making you want to buy their product. It's making you want to support them. And so we might think that we are immune to propaganda and that these people back then were a bunch of suckers because they fell for all the nationalism. But I'd actually say that we are more susceptible to it now because there is more forms of it. Guys, there are even companies like Google and Facebook will actually sell your search history, like information about you, to companies so that companies can figure out, whoa, well, they bought this last month. That means they're probably going to want this 2 years from now. You know, they bought this mattress this year. Maybe in 10 years they're going to want to go up to a king. Or, oh, they're approaching this age in life. They're probably going to start having kids. Let's start sending this magazine subscription. Try to get them, right? Companies do that, like for real. And oddly enough, my wife, a lot of times she'll like talk about a product. It doesn't really happen to me very much, but she'll talk about a product with her phone near her, and like maybe like 30 minutes later, there will be an ad on her Facebook for the product that she was talking about. So like we live in a culture that is heavily saturated with propaganda. It's not always government-made propaganda, whereas back then it was predominantly pretty much all government-made. Now, funny story, I'm going to go ahead and explain this slide, and then, because I'm sure you have it written down by now, and then I'm going to tell you a funny story. So in the Balkans, the region of Southeast Europe, the Slavic peoples, the Balkan Mountains, we have something called Pan-Slavism, which is basically nationalism and want for freedom for Slavic people. And you're like, what are Slavic people? Well, it'd be kind of like, although this actor is English, he does look Slavic. It'd be kind of like Russian. They usually have very dark hair, pale complexion, usually with curly hair. Like the Greeks. The Greeks are technically Southeast European. I wouldn't necessarily classify them as Slavic people, but they do look very similar to Slavic people. So anybody that's in that Southeast Europe, that Orthodox they're kind of like Russians, but not Russians. Transylvanians, Dracula, the legend of Dracula comes from like Vlad the Impaler comes from that territory. So the most nationalistic of all of this group were the Serbians. Oh yeah, Vlad the Impaler. I forget that I have this on here. So before I get to my funny story, I want to talk about Vlad the Impaler just because he's a really cool historical figure, right? So Serbia was very nationalistic. I kind of want to talk about some of the history of this region really briefly, and that is that there was a real person that the character Dracula was based off of, and he is Slavic. And in this time period, you're going to see some propaganda emerging about Vlad the Impaler, because for the longest time, people kind of considered Vlad the Impaler to be a villain, hence why Bram Stoker made the character Dracula based off of him. But a lot of people in this time period are going to start to view him as a hero. So if you haven't been, if you've noticed in the notes, the Muslims conquered most of Southeast Europe after the medieval age. And I said after the first 4 Crusades, really all the Crusades after that are to prevent the Muslims from conquering more of Europe. Well, the Muslims conquer, what is Serbia in this time period, Greece, a pretty good chunk of Southeast Europe. A lot of these countries were ruled by the Ottoman Empire. Well, in the medieval age, Vlad was a ruler of one of the Slavic nations, and he resisted the Ottoman Empire. And his story is a lot more complicated than that. There's a point he was pretty much just a nationalist for his Slavic nation of Transylvania. There's at one point he'll side with whoever is going to give him what he wants. There's a point where he actually sides with the Ottomans because the Austrians are going against him. And so then there's another time where he's with the Austrians and he's going against the Ottomans. But the point is, Vlad the Impaler was a king who resisted the influence of these empires and fought for nationalism of the Slavic people way back in the medieval age. So he's kind of considered and viewed as a hero in this World War I time because he stood up for his nation. Now, you're like, well, then why would he seem like a villain? Well, it's the way in which he went about defending his nation. He earned the name Vlad the Impaler because Vlad realized that people are not afraid of men, they're afraid of monsters. So he sought to essentially inflict terror upon his enemies. He wanted to be viewed as such a cruel enemy to his enemies, not his own people. He was actually a pretty good leader to his own people. He wanted to seem like this monster to his enemies, so he would do things that would make him seem almost kind of like a vampire. He would impale his enemies, as you see here. He would drink their blood. He would do all sorts of crazy things. There's one legend where the Ottoman Empire liked to have children soldiers. They would come in and so say like Transylvania, for example, they would come into Vlad's throne room and say, hey, we're going to take your son so that we can have more soldiers in our army. They take them as kids so that they can brainwash them and make them like the most loyal, epic soldiers. They were kind of like the Ottoman Empire's most brutal and epic soldiers. And supposedly Vlad was one of those, and then he grew up and he was no longer in it. So they come for his son, and he's like, no, my son's not going through what I went through. And so the Ottomans are like, okay, well, if you're not going to give us your son, we're going to destroy you. And so Vlad then became really Vlad the Impaler and defended his nation from this tyrannical government. And in order to appear to strike fear into his enemies' hearts, there was a force that came to attack Transylvania, and he somehow magically won, and he impaled all of them on pikes, as you see here. And then he abandoned that castle and fled to another nation because he knew he wouldn't be able to defeat the entire Ottoman army. So then the Ottoman army kind of shows up and sees just this field of like thousands of impaled people. And he, again, would supposedly dip his bread in their blood. And, he kind of gave this impression that he was a monster so that his enemies would be scared and not attack him so that his people could have their nation. But all of that relates to this element of nationalism. He fought for his country to be its own country and not be a part of the Ottoman Empire or the Austrian Empire, which is exactly what the Slavic people are dealing with in this time period. So though Vlad is a medieval figure, a lot of people in this time period are probably going to look to him because of what he did in his time period. Kind of an interesting story, though. I love this little thing. He sees the marshmallow like, well, these are great. He impales it because he's Vlad the Impaler. All right, so by the way, the clips I'm getting from is from a movie called Dracula Untold. It does. It's obviously fictional, but it does kind of loosely base itself into history with Vlad the Impaler. So before I get into this, I want to tell you the funny story of whenever I thought that I was immune to propaganda. Whenever I was in college, in college everybody's a little bit arrogant. You kind of think that you're God's gift to the universe. It's just what college kids do. You think you know everything, and then you get out of college and you realize that you don't actually know that much. But point is, me and my wife were going on a date, and the stereotypical go to the movies. We're gonna go see a movie, and honestly, I don't even remember what movie we saw. That should tell you how influential this one commercial was. But point is, we were college students. We didn't have a lot of money, so we went in there determined not to get popcorn and a drink. Because if you go to the movies as a couple and you get popcorn and a drink, you're looking at around like $30, $40 date. Not including dinner if you go to dinner, right? Dinner and a movie. So we were determined to not spend that money. And my wife, she's a lot stronger at resisting propaganda than I am. I really love popcorn. In fact, I've told her several points, like during this isolation, I just want to go to the movie theater to get popcorn. I miss popcorn. I want movie theater popcorn. That's what I want so badly, but I can't because we're under quarantine. We're not allowed to go to the movies. They're not open. So at any rate, we sit down, and I'm holding it in because, again, I love popcorn. Movie theater popcorn is one of the best things in the world. It really is. It's like gold. So we're like sitting there, and it's like the trailers haven't started yet. There's always like 40 minutes of movie trailers before the actual movie begins. So we're sitting there, and we didn't get popcorn and a drink, but everybody else did. So I'm sitting there, and I can smell it. I can smell the popcorn, and I want it. I want that popcorn. And it's so, you can just smell the butter. The person next to me is eating it. I want it. But you know what? I held strong. I did not get the popcorn. We're good. The lights start to go dark. They start the little commercials, and they play this ad. I'm sure you've seen it because they renewed it. Like, they've showed it. I don't think they're using it right now. Well, especially not right now, but I haven't seen it in like a year. But I'm sure that you have seen this commercial if you've been to the movie theaters in the last 5 years. Again, I thought that this isn't going to work. Like, we were determined. Like, we said it out loud, like, we are not going to get popcorn. So we sit down, we were sitting down, and this commercial starts, and it's just a white screen, and you start to hear that sound. Pop, 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 right? You just hear it. And then, again, the screen's white, and the popcorn it's popping on the screen. It's like the screen is the bag, and you can hear the saltiness of the popcorn. You can almost hear the buttery saltiness as the screen fills up with popping popcorn. And the guy next to me, I can smell it. I can see it. And then the popcorn roll, like, it falls down, and I'm like, don't go. I want you. Please. And the sound quality is so good. It's just like, like, you can hear it. And then you're like, okay, what else are you going to throw at me? You hear one of the most glorious noises in the world after these ice cubes, the screen's clear again, and then these ice cubes fall down, and you hear all the dinkling. Then you hear one of the best noises in the world. The sound of a soda can opening. There is not much better in this world than a cold Dr. Pepper in a can. But anyway, then you see it pour into the glass, and it fills up, and the fizz, the sound of the carbonation, and you're just like, and then a straw comes in. So one of those like spirally ones, really fancy, comes in. You start drinking it away, and you're like, you already took my popcorn, now you're drinking my soda. And it goes away, and it says, enjoy your popcorn and Coke, and enjoy the movie. And I'm just like, I look over to Sarah, And she just kind of gives me this little nod like, and I was like, okay, well, I got up immediately, large popcorn, extra butter, large soda. I kid you not, ladies and gentlemen. I have not, since then, not once have I not gotten a large popcorn and either an icy or a soda. Not once. Because that commercial, it taught me a lesson. It's not the same without the popcorn. You have to have it. You know? The ad worked on me. Not only did it work on me for that one time, but it worked on me for like life. That's how much this commercial worked on me. You know, like, guys, I know some people, they watch like a Taco Bell commercial, they go get Taco Bell. Like, some people are very susceptible to ads. There are some places that I'm very, like Arby's. Sometimes I will just think of the phrase, Arby's, we have the meats, and suddenly I'll be craving Arby's. And the craving will not go away for like, there was once I like lasted like 2 weeks. It will not go away until I get Arby's. I will constantly be craving Arby's until I get it. And now I crave Arby's, but I don't trust fast food workers right now in the quarantine. I just don't think that they're going to keep me safe. But anyway, we're going to find this commercial and we're going to watch it so that you know exactly how we do on time. So that you know exactly. What is this? What? Man, kids do not pay attention to my instructions. Was it in? That was Amtrak. My hands are cold. Maybe it was, no, Amtrak is a freaking, it was AMC. Yeah. Cinemac, that's what it was. We're going to watch this commercial. And you're going to see that it's amazing. Now, obviously, I don't have the sound quality that they had, but still.
Welcome to Carmike Cinemas. Please turn off your cell phones and other electronic devices and put on your Real D glasses.
Imagine that with a movie speakers. Man, again, I don't have the speakers that they have or the HD quality, but you can see that it works very well. That's not what we want. It works very well. So, man, I tell you, man, I got up out of my seat. I was like, let's get some popcorn. Let's go. Now, I got to say, that story's a lot more fun to tell when I can see you guys' reactions and everything. I can, like, play off on it, and I can get more into it, but hopefully you still enjoyed it. So Serbia became an independent country by the Treaty of San Stefano. That's not how you pronounce it, but that's how I'm going to say it because Stefano sounds funny. In 1878. In the 1900s, many Serbians were still ruled by Turkey, aka the Ottoman Empire. And Austria-Hungary and Serbians were determined to be ruled by themselves. So this led to rebellions and terrorisms, terrorist attacks, which are usually we refer to as the Balkan Wars, which makes the Balkan area very unstable. Now, the fourth big barrel of gunpowder is imperialism, which is what you spent chapter 11 looking at. That was that textbook guide, chapter 11. So if you didn't pick up on your textbook reading, It's basically where a bunch of European nations go into Africa and take whatever the heck they want, regardless of how that affects Africa. In fact, the modern layout of Africa, like with the countries, is because of Europeans and imperialism. So imperialism is defined as a belief in empire building by using the nation's power to take over and dominate other countries or lands. Countries who believed that they were superior thought it was all right to conquer and rule others, particularly if they were inhabited by races they thought were inferior. This is largely stemmed off of social Darwinism and evolution. Charles Darwin's theory of evolution is very prominent in this time period. So the idea was that survival of the fittest, right? So if you were to come across a group of people that were still using sticks as weapons, you would interpret that as, well, we're more evolved than them, and thus we are superior to them and they are inferior to us. And so because they were viewed as inferior through the belief of evolution and social Darwinism, that would then, in their eyes, give them the right to do whatever it is that they wanted to do, because survival of the fittest. It is our duty to perpetuate social Darwinism. The weak will die, the strong will live. Well, clearly we're stronger than these people because our technology is much more advanced, and we're not still living in tribal-like situations. So that's kind of the ideology behind that. Obviously, I don't agree with that ideology. But, you know, those that say that so many horrible things have come from religion, well, horrible things have come from evolution and social Darwinism as well, atheism, so nobody's blameless. This is why European countries thought that it was okay to colonize in Africa and Asia. The 1900s, the British Empire will cover 1/5 of all the land on the earth. That is a test question. Just imagine how much land that is. I believe I have a picture right here. Yes. Everything in red is occupied or owned by England. And that is a big reason why it is a world war. Because when England gets involved in the war, so do all the territories that they occupy. So in World War I, you're going to see soldiers from India, from Africa, from Australia, from New Zealand, from New Guinea, from the Philippines, from Canada, from Central South America. You're going to see even people from like the Middle East fighting in this war, because England is drawn into it and they own 1/5 of all the land on the earth. That is the most out of any country, I think, in history. Even more than, like China or Russia, which are all, China and Russia are actually smaller than they look on the map, because when you're taking a globe and making it flat, you have to distort things a little bit. Africa is actually quite a bit bigger, and this part of the world and Greenland are also quite a bit smaller. I think Australia is also bigger, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, you see some people from India training. Now, the reason why this is a contributing factor to World War I is because Germany and those countries are going to want to compete over these territories. In addition to, a lot of these territories are very rich in natural resources, and those natural resources are going to be what allows England and Germany and a lot of these European nations to build their armies, all of their ships and, all of that, all of their material. So all the bullets and all the wood and everything, a lot of it they're going to get from their imperial territories. All right. This is just talking about how Germany's going to want a little piece of the pie of imperialism. That's going to add tension. These European nations are fighting over these different territories, and that can create tension. But again, so the main reasons that imperialism is one of the big barrels of gunpowder is that it creates competition between the European nations, and it gives them natural resources. All right, so when Kaiser Wilhelm II decided that he wanted some of the colonies in Africa as well, huge tension and stress became Yeah, that should be became, or I guess become could work. Become a commonplace within the African colonies of Britain, France, Belgium, and Italy. Again, it's mainly for materials, lumber, metal, ore, which is pretty much metal, minerals, animals, plants, you name it. Soldiers, to an extent. The fifth major gunpowder barrel it's a very big deal because it also leads to what the match that sets off the 5 barrels of gunpowder is, stems from this reason. And that is unstable governments. A lot of these new nations that had nationalism that are new and separate from their former empires, such as Serbia, they're not exactly the most stable areas ever. So that's going to be another big contributing factor of why the war starts. So most of these are ruled by one man and very corrupt. The autocratic governments made their people go to war on a whim for simply more power or territory, which is pretty much what World War I is about anyway. In 1903, the Serbian king and his wife are assassinated by members of a group called the Black Hand. It's an assassination group. The reason that this Serbian assassin group assassinated their own king was because he had sympathies towards Austria, right? So, I mean, if you're going to have a name for a group of assassins, the Black Hand is pretty epic, let's be honest. And yes, this is from Skyrim and the Black Brotherhood. We know. We know what you did. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move me to the other side so that you can see this. So the Ottoman Empire is one of the unstable governments. It is on the verge of collapse. Its nickname is the sick man in Europe. Every country eventually dies, and it just so happens to be that at this time, the Ottoman Empire, it is their time to die. I mean, they had been in charge of this territory since the medieval age, so I mean, that's a pretty long time to be in charge of a territory. You add that in with a lot of their territories are those Slavic peoples that are very fueled by nationalism in the Balkan regions, and that's really only going to add to their collapse. In 1912, 2 years before the war, Italy will defeat the old and failing Ottoman Empire, stealing yet more lands from them and colonies in Africa and near the Mediterranean Sea. Then we have a series of Balkan wars, which are essentially countries like Serbia and Bulgaria and Montenegro, which are these countries that are separating from the Ottoman Empire, and they will defeat the Ottoman Empire. The First Balkan War, which is right after that war with Italy, the Ottomans will lose to Greece, Serbia, Bulgaria, and Montenegro, each of them making themselves their own country. So the Ottoman Empire is really collapsing. Really everything on this map that's not labeled Austria was a part of the Ottoman Empire before the Balkan Wars. Second Balkan War, they lose to Bulgaria. The Romanians and the Greeks won this war, taking yet more land from their former empire. Third Balkan War, which is like just before World War I breaks out, is going to see the Greeks siding with Bulgaria and both being defeated by Romania, Serbia, and Montenegro. So you can see there's a lot of tumultuous they're fighting each other. They're all, I mean, it's just it's a giant mess, and it's all fueled by nationalism. And it creates a lot of tension in the area. Not all these countries are going to be on the same side in World War I, all these new Slavic nations. So most people in these small new countries, Serbia, breaking from the Ottomans, identify themselves as Slavic people, which Russia kind of saw as like their little brother. So Russia is going to have a very strong alliance with these Slavic nations, especially Serbia. All right, I'm going to move me back to the other side. We're almost done for today. So the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, this is the match that ignites the war. This is what starts it. We have each of the 5 barrels of gunpowder on the boat, but those barrels of gunpowder by themselves aren't going to do anything unless something ignites it, and that is going to be the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. So the spark that touches off World War I on June 28, 1914, a member of the Serbian nationalist terrorist group organization called the Black Hand, named Gavrilo Princip, will assassinate the Archduke of Austria and his wife while they are in Bosnia, Sarajevo, Bosnia. And the Serbians wanted to kill him. Serbia wanted to take the Bosnian Serbs area from Austria because those people are Slavic people. And again, this is about reuniting all the Slavic people. So they kill the Archduke. Then Austria declares war on Serbia, which pretty much leads to the whole thing going sour. Now, this is the guy who did it. I don't know if I'm blocking his head. I'm sure you can see at least part of it. But he's probably not what he's probably not what you thought an assassin would look like. But he's captured immediately, put on trial. He said, "I am a Yugoslav nationalist aiming for the unification of all Yugoslavs, aka Slavic people, and do not care what form of state, but it must be free from Austria." Princip, 19, was too young to receive the death penalty, so he's going to be put in prison where he will die of tuberculosis in the last year of World War I. Okay, so this leads to the declaration of war. The assassination led to the Austrian-Hungary's declaring war on Serbia. When Russia mobilized due to the alliance with Serbia, Germany will declare war on Russia. It's like what I said with the alliances. It's like a dominoes falling over. Well, they declared war. Well, now our allies have to join. Well, now our allies have to join. And before you know it, what could have just been a very small war between Serbia and Austria is now a global conflict because Germany's brought in, Russia's brought in, France is brought in, England is brought in. All these countries are brought in. So this began the expansion of the war to include all those involved in mutual defense alliances. All right. Small note, something to note is that it is also kind of like a family affair because a lot of them are related, the leaders of these nations. Right. So the British monarch George V was the first cousin of Germany's Kaiser Wilhelm II and Spain's Queen Enya, Romania's Queen Marie, Russia's Tsar Nicholas II, and the Tsar's wife. They're all related, as well as with the Queen of Norway. So you can actually see the relation. King George of England, right? Tsar Nicholas II, you can see the relation between them, I feel like. No, Wilhelm II, he looks unique enough, partially because of that mustache, But, small note that it's like a family affair. So you definitely want to write this slide down. It says main players of World War I in 1914. These are the actual alliances during the war. So you definitely want to know this for the test. The Allied forces will be France, the United Kingdom, Russia, Serbia, and Japan. This is not World War II, so Japan is not a bad guy, and neither is Italy. The Central Powers will be Germany, Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, the Ottoman Empire, and Romania will join the Central Powers at first, but change sides in 1916. Italy will remain neutral until they are also brought onto the Allied side because of Austria's invading of Italy. So these are the two sides. The Central Powers are called the Central Powers because it's largely, they're in the center of Europe, so it makes sense. The Allies are called the Allies because I guess they didn't have any other kind of name. This is a map of the Triple Entity and the Triple Alliance, so we're not going to look at that map too long. And that's where we're going to leave off. Tomorrow we're going to talk about what is today? Yeah, so I guess Friday we're going to do The Great War Begins, and that's where we're going to leave off for today. Make sure that you answer the discussion questions and that you are doing your part to make sure that you succeed in this class. This is, again, probably the most difficult unit, so you really don't want to take it lightly. You want to take it very seriously and do a good job, because this test will kick your butt. So yeah, have a wonderful day. I will see you tomorrow. Make sure you answer those discussion questions. Peace out.